Welcome, everybody. I'm Brandon Dawkins with Tribune Digital Media here with Scott Buttram, publisher of the Trussville Tribune. And as you know, we've been talking about the municipal election season that is upon us this summer. And so we wanted to take the time out to focus on the mayoral position in the city of Trussville. And so we're doing these individual interviews for all the candidates who are running for mayor of Trussville. We will have live forums later in the summer like we do during every municipal election season, and we will be doing those. But we wanted to do these unedited interviews for the city of Trussville. This is an important election, and this is something we wanted to go ahead and offer the candidates and offer to the people of Trussville to really get a chance to hear from these candidates. They were going to get plenty of time to answer questions, and we're going to have a great conversation. And we're starting today with JT Smallwood.
Right. You know, we've got a change in administration for the first time in 9 years. We will have a new mayor.
Right.
And we don't know who that will be, but we know the three who have announced. And so we're starting these interviews now. As you mentioned, we start with Mr. Smallwood here, who's currently the Jefferson County tax collector, but we'll be doing this with all other candidates. Just so you understand, as our audience, there are no ground rules here. We're going to be discussing their backgrounds, their political background, their personal histories, their plans for Trussville, just anything that you may be asking as a voter. That's what we hope to hit on. These may go rather long. We warned JT, he may be with us for a while today, but that's what we want. We want the candidates to really be able to go into depth for you, for our audience, and explain things. There are things out there floating around already, and qualifying has not even closed yet. So that'll just get worse. We hope this will circumvent some of that. This allows the candidates to address you directly. Just so you know, you will get our full question and the candidate's full answer. This will be unedited. Other than changing camera angles, this interview will run from beginning to end. When you see this, you will see all of the mayoral candidate interviews like this. These will be for the Trussville mayor's race. They'll all be released at the same time. No candidate will see the other one's interview before everybody sees them all. So that kind of explains it.
Okay.
I'll let you kick it off.
All right. Well, JT, we want to. Are we okay to be on a first name basis?
Absolutely. Please call me JT. Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Appreciate you being here.
Because you would be new to the political arena in Trussville specifically, but not new to the political arena, will you just tell people about your background and what you do with Jefferson County?
Yes, I've had the esteemed honor and privilege of serving with Jefferson County as tax collector. I'm in my fourth 6-year term, and I ran in 2002. I was successful, and about that time, a couple of years later, that's when we encountered something really significant to the Birmingham area. That was the Health South fraud case, which we played a role in uncovering the personal property fraud dimension. And that took a couple of years to unravel, and we fought that all the way to the Supreme Court, and we won, saving our schools and cities a substantial amount of money. So that was probably one of the big highlights of that first 6 years tenure. I ran for re-election in 2008, and we talked about it briefly a minute ago. And when I ran on the premise of serving each in every one of the 35 cities. So I made a point to go by those cities and get to know the mayors and speak to the council on occasion, or the fire districts, or the school districts, and get to know them personally. And it showed in 2008, because I was the #1 vote getter in the history of Jefferson County in a contested race with 182,000 votes. And that was a testament to our office staff, our hard work, our effort, but the relationships I built along the journey. They played a role in that. And we continue to foster those relationships and build upon them. Ran again in 2014, and we were the #1 vote getter in the county there, and again in 20. So we've had this broad backing from over the mountain folks and the business community especially, which I'm grateful for. And here in Trussville, I've partnered with the business community over the years. And during the 2008 through 12 downturn, they've come to know me as a friend to business. I was able to help them. If you drive through the business corridor, you'll see probably 8 out of 10 businesses here in Trussville have my sign in the yard, the ones that have a sign up. And that's because during the hard times I was there for them, we gave them payment plans, extended out their payments when they couldn't meet the obligations, and we're there, and we suspended interest when we could, and helped them stay afloat, the ones we could. So they know that, and they want to kind of pay back and support us along the way, and we're grateful for that.
Okay. Jim, one of the things I wanted to ask you, you've been a long-time Trussville resident.
Correct.
How long have you lived in Trussville?
Since the 90s. Moved
Since
into
the
Trussville.
90s.
And I grew up in the eastern area in Roebuck, down the street. So Trussville was always our neighbor.
I got you.
And then moved up here in the 90s. I've been invested in church here and community. I ran the men's Bible study here in Trussville, the Iron Sharpers, for the past 11, 12 years, which most people don't know about, but a lot of people do. And that's growing by considerable amounts the past several years.
Well, as a resident, you've kept up with the goings on
Oh,
of the
yes,
city.
absolutely.
We hope you've read the Tribune on occasion.
No, routinely. Routinely.
So here's my first question.
Sure.
Trussville has been the fastest growing city in Jefferson County for, 20 years, based on the U.S. Census data estimates that come out yearly. Looks like we're headed to 30.
That's right.
Unless something drastically changes, unless Iran gets a bomb and they've got Trussville's number, looks like we're headed that way. Schools have kind of gone to the top. What, from your perspective as a Trussville resident, what do you think this administration has done right?
Well, I think they've done a lot of things right. And I think they've put their best foot forward. I think they did the best they could with the information they had. And I think there were certain initiatives, certain building initiatives that were favorable to all the citizens. So, I don't want to be critical of anybody's initiatives. I think they're all well-meaning and well-intentioned. I think if there's a fault, sometimes we can get aggressive in our growth plans, and we get away from what I call the smart growth strategies, which basically the objective is to push measured growth so you don't get ahead of your infrastructure. Because when you get ahead of your infrastructure, you're trying to play catch up for schools, for roads, and that's what we have here. But not only here, but in other cities as well. But there's been other cities that we can look to that have dealt with that effectively and efficiently. Huntsville, Madison, Prattville, Daphne, Eastern Shore. Some of those fast-growing municipalities have adopted some of these policies and have alleviated that fast growth, overcrowding on the main travel arteries and all that. And I've kept their schools abreast and on pace, not overcrowding those things. And public safety as well. First responders, we don't want to overburden them as well with this growth.
Was there something that happened, like in the past 4 years? Like, when was the moment that you thought, you know what, I just need to put my hat in the ring here? Like, what
Well,
made you
I've been
run?
in Invested Partners community for a long time. I've worked with many city council members through the years, and but I was asked to run for mayor 8 years ago by a business leader here in town, Dr. Ben Hooker, who was one of my mentors growing up, who owned the strip mall across from Wendy's back there. He was one of the first ones. He's also a landowner, business owner, developer. He was one of the first ones to ask me 8 years ago. And I said, Dr. Hooker, I said, we have a lot more stabilizing to do at the county level, state level, before I even think about that. But that seed was planted at that particular time. And I've been friends with Gene Melton through the years. He led the city with distinction and honor, and had the reserves built up. So all these leaders have contributed. Arthur Paynes was probably the greatest single leader this area has ever had. His footprint continues to be a foundation that we can look to for excellence. People like that.
Okay. I want to go back to did you call it smart growth?
Smart growth.
And I think I saw that in one of your campaign videos as well. Would you propose, if you were elected mayor, would you propose, I think you mentioned a 12-month moratorium on building in Prattville.
That would have been actually 8, 10, 12 years ago.
Okay.
We're a little late to the ball game to implement that. Now, you hear the council members saying or asserting, hey, you cannot put the brakes on development. That's very true, but neither can you put the accelerator on development. And you have to look at a lot of things in particular. And I always refer back to one of the most prolific individuals in the field of zoning and planning, and that is Phil Turquette. He was the city of Birmingham's zoning and planning director for many years. Upon his retirement, he was snatched up by Homewood and then Hoover. He had expert witness on these cases all around the state. And if you were, he says this analogy, if you were to sum up what is the basic core principle of zoning, and he'll go around the room and ask you, you may say aesthetical configurations or symmetry or all these things, and he said, those are all great answers, but it's safety. He said, the rudimentary definition of zoning is safety. Is this subdivision going to dump another 120 cars on this road at 6:20 or 6:30 in the morning? Those are considerations that we have to bring to the table. Is it going to overstress our fire district? Is it going to overstress our city? So we have to factor those in. We cannot be developer-led. We have to be citizen-led and work in symmetry with the developers, with the city policy, growth policies, with what the citizens want as well. They're our taxpayers, they're our base, and what the business can support. Everybody wants to see growth, but growth has to be measured, it has to be responsible. If not, we could have a lot of kids in the school system and overburden it, and that's the last thing we want to happen here.
I think, and you would know this better than I think all the land in the city limits of Trussville is zoned for something.
Yes.
Everything's got a zoning
Correct.
There. So if you've got a developer who has 20 acres and it's already zoned R1, is there anything the city can really do to stop him? Or how, let me rephrase that.
Sure.
How would you approach it?
Well, stop is probably not the word you want to use. Like I said, ideally this would have been set into action 8 years ago, 12 years ago, when we started experiencing prolific growth along this corridor. I mean, it's people are attracted here for our great schools,
right,
for our restaurants, for our malls. And I want to continue to partner with those businesses and continue to work with the schools. But getting back to managing growth, let me give you an example. To build 20 to 30 homes in a certain sector, all $1 million plus homes. It's been great for the tax base. Malbrook said no, we don't need it, we don't want it. Maybe a year or two bring it back up, and we'll look at it then. But right now we're not ready for that. And
is that the property near Whole Foods?
No, I can't remember the exact area. I'll think about it in a second, maybe come up with. But yeah, so we cannot be afraid to delay a development. We cannot be afraid to put it on hold and bring it back up at a particular time.
But to his point in the question, and I'm curious about
Sure,
this all
sure,
the time.
sure.
If you have, if that landowner already has the right zoning,
Yes.
how does a city stop?
I mean, if he were asking for rezoning,
Yeah,
then
that's
you
a
have some
get a
control.
hand
But
in.
if it's already zoned appropriately, what do you?
See,
You
there
are your
are
hands tied.
different things here. You can come to the table, and I'm not saying we restrict development. That's not what I'm saying
Yeah,
at all. I'm
no,
saying we
I
have to do it
understand.
responsibly, as to not burden our infrastructure. So I think we have to have a long-range, long-term look at how we want to grow as a city and have that discussion. And I think we need to come back with policy that we're all comfortable with, that the school system's comfortable with. Hey, are you going to be comfortable, Dr. Martin, school board, are you going to be comfortable if we have 300 homes here? And let's have input from them,
Right.
from everybody, not just a developer standpoint. And I'm friends with developers, I'm friends with builders, I'm friends with realtors. They seem to be all pushing me, so I'm good with all that. So, but we have to have, as a community, we have to have a conversation of where we want this city to be in 5 years, in 10 years,
Right.
in 15 years. We continue to overstress this one travel artery here, and we also have to have a plan to take pressure and take volume off this travel artery. If we don't, it's going to take 45 minutes instead of 30 minutes to get from the north end to the south end
Right.
in the morning time.
Just to clarify for people, when you say travel artery, I'm assuming
Highway
you're
11.
meaning Highway 11.
Highway 11.
And if you're talking about smart growth, what do you consider the growth that's happened in Trussville that you would consider not smart, that's already happened? Like,
Well-
looking back, we've tremendous. So
well, fastest growing city in Jefferson County, there's been
Absolutely.
A lot of growth.
What do you
Talk
look
about.
out at right now and say, that was really a bad idea?
Yeah.
Well,
do you have an example of?
Yeah.
You know, we can all play armchair quarterback and look back negatively at a development. But there was some pushback on the Hamilton project. There was some community pushback. There were about 700 signatures on a petition not to preserve the Hamilton project.
About how many, what now?
700
It was 700 signatures.
Yeah.
Signatures
Yeah.
on that petition not to preserve that piece of property.
Right.
And perhaps build that next to Winn-Dixie where the available property was. There's much more room to expand. But you know, that's neither here nor there because it didn't happen. So, and was that an appropriate? The business district was an appropriate district using the premise of highest and best use for the Board of Education building. It perhaps could have been somewhere else because that is a high income tax bracket area there.
Right.
And that the city could be experiencing the windfall off of that if it was an economic driven.
Had a retail.
Yeah, retail, a restaurant, whatever. And there's also a shortage of office space here in Trussville. I had an accountant, CPA friend of mine calls me up and said, "Hey, JT, I need 4,000 square feet of office space for my accounting firm. Can you help me find it?" And I get these calls all the time from realtors, people, all of the county asking me to help, and I do help.
Right.
So I started calling friends who have buildings. We didn't have 4,000 square feet of office space available anywhere in Trussville, so we missed a great opportunity. Think about this, to have 20, 30 employees coming here every day in an office, eating lunch here, buying gas here, and all those things like that. It's economic development. I mean, even if it's small, it's still economic development, and we need those things. So we have shortages in some areas. Like,
But isn't the Trussville Central Office essentially a professional office building?
Yeah, that
It
I was
is.
going to say
I mean,
that.
that's,
yeah. And they're-
that's a
they're
lot of
doing all
employees in there that are going out and eat lunch
It,
every
it,
day.
it, it's true. It's true. But we lose the ad valorem advantage on that piece of property there. And there's a rule called highest and best use for
Right.
development, and you try to keep schools, churches out of those districts
Right.
for economic purposes to fund the cities.
Well, I'm from Tuscaloosa. I saw First Baptist Church take over 4 city blocks.
Wow.
It doesn't work everywhere,
Yeah.
but I get your point.
Do you want to go?
You go ahead.
Okay. Well, so while we're talking about growth, okay, let's take the Trussville Entertainment District.
Yes.
So I've heard several times that maybe you, and this may not be true, and if it's not, clear
Yes,
it up.
yes.
Okay. That you've expressed that maybe that is a development that shouldn't have happened.
Never stipulated that. Never suggested
Okay,
that.
okay. Because
While we're addressing rumors, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to address rumors other than to give you an opportunity to address them.
Certainly.
Because we don't report
yeah, that one I've
rumors.
heard
Sure,
several
sure.
times. So I didn't want to put
Did
it
you
out
tell
on the table.
anyone, did you tell people this will all be gone in 3 years
Ne-
regarding the entertainment?
never suggested that.
Okay.
You know, I wish the entertainment district was at capacity. I wish that we had volume there every single night of the week. I don't know who suggested that, but we want to see all of our, working in governmental tax. We want to see all of our businesses in Jefferson County flourishing,
Right.
established. I've worked with realtors on the commercial level, bringing tenants in. It just kind of is a hobby on the side, I love seeing that happen. Walk-Ons has a lot of foot traffic. I mean, think about if Walk-Ons was over at the entertainment, did all the volume they're generating. That'd be excellent for that top. Yeah, I'm a fan. I personally go to the entertainment district, eat at Ferris's and the other place like everyone else, and I want to see it continue to flourish and continue to thrive.
Can we step back to the Hamilton property real quick?
Certainly.
Because I just want to dig
Certainly.
a little deeper on
Certainly.
that. You're right, because we covered that whole saga. That was multiple council meetings,
Yes.
planning and zoning, stuff back and forth, and it seemed like that was going to go on forever. And you're right in that we did have a lot of citizens that wanted it preserved.
Yes.
Primarily the ones in Dew Gardens who live directly behind that property. In fact, they're adjacent to that property. But the Hamilton heirs did have a right to sell and have their property developed. So how can the city stop that other than buying the property, which has created some financial problems they're dealing with right now?
I come from a different perspective.
Okay.
Because Mrs. Frances U. Hamilton was a friend.
Uh-huh.
She was my Western Civ professor at Sanford for 2 years, and she loved Trussville. She was a great historian. She worked with Alabama Baptist on the Historical Commission. She was extraordinary with the local Trussville history. And from a personal standpoint, if she saw her property developed right now, she would really be upset about it. But I understand you have heir property, and heirs can do what they wish to do with it.
Yeah.
But if there was ever a time for the city of Trussville to step up and to preserve a property, that was probably it. Because you had the beautiful tree line there. You had that pill. We could put a walking track through there. I'm just saying this, with all the citizens' opposition to it, and the sewage retaining pond caused quite a problem from some of the people and the noise and all that. And there's not a sufficient buffer zone to buffer those people from the noise over there. So I think we could do a couple of things different. But I think in retrospect, we probably should have preserved that tree line. A lot of the cities, if you notice, are keeping their tree lines, or purchasing those and putting growth in other places. Like I said, next to the Winn-Dixie would have been a great area. It's like a 40-acre spread back there.
But is it, I do appreciate all
Yeah,
that,
sure,
I do.
sure.
But is it unrealistic at this point to think that you can preserve very much property on Highway 11 in that capacity? I mean, it is a business district
Probably not
now.
trust. We could have in Vestavia or Mountain Brook, in Homewood, some areas where they probably have more.
Like their zoning regulation
Yeah,
is
they probably have more of an intrinsic desire to keep a tree line there and to keep that as it is. But with this growth we're experiencing, probably not. You're correct. But if we have,
it's hard not to put retail on a 4-lane state
it
highway.
is very hard nowadays.
And by the way, I grew up on a road called Skyland Boulevard in Tuscaloosa.
You know all about it.
It's US 11 bypass,
Yeah.
so I literally lived
I'm all
on
about
Highway 11.
keeping tree lines. I just didn't know if realistically.
Realistically, it's hard. You
Yeah.
have to make that hard line choice that you're going to do that. And realistically, it is difficult. And you have to have a meeting of the minds for the parties, the heirs, the city, everybody else.
Well, but then you've got also, you're mentioning the property next to Winn-Dixie, which you're right, that's a big undeveloped, but it runs right up to a
It does.
Presbyterian church.
It does.
It is Presbyterian. That I think everybody in Trussville holds in the highest regard.
Absolutely.
It's a historic church, and so
Beautiful.
It's almost. I'm surprised we've been able to preserve that on Highway 11.
Absolutely.
To be honest with you.
Likewise.
So, how would you address something like that? Trussville's not going to quit developing.
Trussville's not going to quit developing. We develop. In my role downtown, well, I serve the whole county, but I've had particular interest in the downtown redevelopment. I played a significant role in that. Probably every loft and condo developer downtown has my cell phone number. I work with them doing the pro formas from lending, from zoning, and all those things. I probably help with more development than anyone downtown, any single person. But it gets also to the point of incentivization, how you incentivize a company or a business to draw them into your jurisdiction. And I asked people, I said, guess how much money we gave the loft and condo developers downtown to come? And they'll say, how much? And I'll say, zero. I says, they'll come, they'll see, when they see a good opportunity, they'll maximize that opportunity, they'll come and they'll invest, and they'll keep on investing over and over and over again.
I'm going to push back on that a little bit.
There might be some impact fees,
I think,
outside impact fees.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about the city.
Yeah.
I don't recall Birmingham putting together an incentive package. But the state historical tax
That's true.
was massive.
That is true.
And Birmingham gobbled it up.
Yes,
for those
but
lofts.
as far as these dollar matches and all that, we don't do that. We don't do that.
Right.
And nor should we. I think we have to.
It was a tax credit that they.
Tax credits are fine, but we have to scrutinize incentivization to a higher level. There's less funding going on.
Right.
So we have to be sure when we recruit a business, that business has a proven track record in another jurisdiction or municipality with a proven track record of finances and all that. To incentivize an unproven, an unknown entity is probably unwise because it could pay off, but chances are it won't pay off, and we will experience a negative impact from that investment.
Most, and I may have missed them because we don't see everything. Most of the incentives that I've seen offered, and by the way, I'm going to just tell you, I think the city needs to be very selective in incentives.
I agree.
I'm with you on that. But most of the incentives I've seen coming through the city, and we've been following it for 17 years because it's very much in vogue. As you know, cities are competing for the same businesses. If you've got interstate exits in your city,
They're coming.
You're competing for one group. Cracker Barrel's not there by accident, and everyone. But the point I was trying to get to is when you're battling for those incentives, you've got to be willing to play the game to an extent. I do think we need to be very selective. I'm not sure there was a benefit in incentivizing a third Starbucks. I think the first two were sufficient. At the same time, if you don't do it, you run the risk of not getting them. But all these incentive packages that I've seen the city put forward, and I, again, maybe missing something, but they've all been based on revenue brought in, not money up front.
Sure.
But you get to retain part of the sales
That's
tax
right.
you collect.
It's a share split.
So it's hard to lose that from that respect, you know.
But the point of return becomes much more significantly long. Like if you break down some of these deals, not only just cities, for every city, it could be a 15-year window before we have.
Some cities we cover have 65-year agreements.
It could be. It's going to be a long-term investment. You have to be willing to
that would be more than I'm alive.
Wait it out. You aren't going to. You know, sometimes we expect immediate impact from these investment dollars. And that's just not always the case.
At this point, I think Trussville's longest incentive package is I think they've got one 25-year package. Do you see that as too long, or do you think that should be a cutoff point? Most of them are probably 5, 6, 10 years.
I'm probably the only candidate that's actually ever been to the industrial abatement classes and the other abatement classes, and you know, being in valuations or being in collections. You have to understand a little bit about all those things. And they can give you a 12, 15-year abatement. And then if a company comes back and expands that company, we can extend out, the state extends out those abatements even further, which a lot of those companies, they capitalize on that in the law. And they go long periods of time with great incentivization as far as from a tax standpoint, which is good. As long as they have good paying jobs, they're bringing into it's a win-win.
Anything beyond 25 begins to scare me because things change so dramatically.
You know, back in the day, the Governor Folsom was probably the first governor of the state to extend huge incentives to Mercedes, and everybody was down on him and down on that. And it proved to be one of the greatest single investments in Alabama history, because it was, you know, it opened the door for all the other automobile makers and the subsidiaries and all the companies, the components and all that turned out to be one of the greatest single factors in Alabama history. So I completely concur.
Turned Alabama into the automaker of the South.
Okay, I want to make sure we hit two issues. You can go to whichever one. I want to talk about the city's relationship with the school system, but I also want to talk about the city's budget. Which one do you want to do first?
Let's start with the school system.
Okay. So you don't have kids in the school system?
Yeah, but I've been a school teacher. I'm the only one of the candidates who actually taught high school. I've taught chemistry and biology.
Okay.
And I've been a close partner with every superintendent in Jefferson County.
Okay.
And I come from a whole different perspective. People don't realize it, but I've worked really hard on behalf of the Trussville School District. Our office, I've probably been the #1 producer, our office, of money. Our 10-year totals was $127 million that we brought into the Trussville school system. I never took a check to Trussville and said, hey, this is what I brought you. We've done it behind the scenes. And I can
but
see
you mean Jefferson County?
Well, see, somebody has to do that. We have to, let me explain how it works. We have 350,000 accounts in this whole county. And you have to bill for 350,000 accounts. And the ones in Trussville, it's a lot of painstaking labor behind the process. And if you see here, you don't just get an automatic check from everybody. There's a lot of work that has to be done behind the scenes. Like litigations or redemptions, we may be in 20 or 30 courts at any one time litigating for these tax monies. It could be tied up in bankruptcy, probate, it could be estates, it could be condemnations. There's some tax collectors that just walk away and say, we'll write that off. Our office don't. I fought for every one of those pennies that are on there because that's my mission. There's been many mornings I didn't leave the tax office at 2 in the morning And my employees don't leave at 4 a.m., 3, 4 a.m., many times through the years, because we personally advocate for those funds. And we show up. Y'all can have this, by the way, if y'all want it. But through the years, our office has probably raised over $200 million for Trussville schools.
But that's your job as tax
That's our
collector.
job. But a sheriff takes credit for his, arrest and all that. The governor's going to take credit. We got to take, I'm never taking credit for this, but I'm just showing you that's our body of work
Right.
as it relates to the school district.
But your campaign material,
Yes.
what is the exact verbiage? You're the largest contributor to TCS.
Through the county.
State. It's a state constitutional office, but we're at the county.
Isn't that a little like taking credit for our tax dollars? Because we're the ones that paid those.
Yeah, but I've never, like I said, I've never brought the check up here and went before the school board and said this. It's just to show that I have a relationship and a duty and obligation to bring those dollars home, to work hard for those and get those. I told people several times, when I first started in 2002, I wanted to be a partner to all the superintendents. So I went out to every superintendent, starting with Dr. Mason, Montbrook, Dr. Farr, and who I became personal friends with all of them. And once a year, I would carry the budget out. Last year's budget, if they were a new superintendent, kind of familiarize themselves with what to expect. And a lot of times they bring the CFO or CPA and I'd show it to them. And I would show them trends. And if we're entering into a downward trend, what might be happening is 08, 09, 10, 11, 12. And I worked with all those superintendents. And I worked with Suzanne Freeman when we transitioned the school from Jefferson County over to the Trussville School District. Worked with her during that time and continue to do such. So the school district will call me quite frequently, either through their lawyer or sometimes even through one of their employees, to ask me about different things happening here in Trussville and how we can capture that or whatever. We work as a partnership.
Well, there is no better perspective on a school system than through the eyes of a parent.
That's correct. That's correct.
And so we get that special view of what's happening there. But I of course get a little bit of a different look at things because we get to sit here and do the things that we do and talk to the people we get to talk to. But I do think that in cities like Trussville and Vestavia and Homewood, where we have our own school systems that are highly successful,
absolutely,
there seems to be a really important balance in the relationship between the school district and city officials.
That's correct.
And so I was just wondering, from your perspective, where do you see or how do you see the importance of that part of that role in being mayor and working with our school district? Because there's a lot to consider, where the city has been really impactful in helping provide some of the
property
that we need.
Certainly.
And so what is your view on how that relationship has gone in the past and how you would handle that in the future?
I've been fortunate enough to be the recipient of teacher support in this area. Lots of teachers, actually. And because I form a partnership not only with the teachers, but with the parents and with administration. And just as my fiduciary contributions have been above board, I'll continue to partner with the school district. There won't be any significant departures from a standard of excellence. We'll continue to partner with them. We'll give them what they need. We'll give them what we can, and we'll work harder to balance our own budget so we have more money to give the Trussville school system, so it can be the flagship of the state. We have so much potential here, so many, so much talent here, so much goodwill here, and I think that we have no intentions but good intentions to help build this schools and partner with that school district and make it the best we possibly can.
JT, I'll share with you, before I even knew you had a campaign website up.
Yes.
I got text messages. I guess probably when it went up or about that time. I was one of the 4 people who incorporated the Trussville City School Foundation, along with Ned Payne, Cheryl, and David Newell. Mm-hmm. And almost immediately got text from a lot of people who were involved with that very first board we put together. That was a screenshot of your campaign page, and just texted me and said, "Do you recall this?" We literally had hundreds of Trussville parents contributing to the foundation.
Absolutely.
We did naming rights, we did fundraisers. Sure. We had young families so excited about having a Trussville City school system that they were making pledges that was a real strain on their budget.
That's right.
Can you understand
Absolutely.
why those people would be offended to see that on your campaign site?
I can understand that, but that certainly was not the intent.
Okay.
The intent,
well, I wanted to give you a chance to clarify.
The intent was to show that we've been good stewards of the job God put us in, and with the help of the people, we've worked diligent, we worked hard to bring in every single penny to the best of our ability with staff that we had. That we've gone through hard times as well at Jefferson County.
Yes.
There's been significant reductions in staff through the years, but we kept up our 99% collection rate through all those times when we had many employees and when we had few employees.
Right.
And we've had to rely upon technologies, new technologies. There was a time when we were extracting the checks out of 350,000 envelopes every year and working together as a team to do that in a short period of time, and it was really hard. But we've done it, and with the help of everyone around us. We all work together. We have a strategic relationship with the assessor. All the offices, the sheriff. We all work together as a team. I love to work behind the scenes. I'm not interested in getting or taking any credit for any successes.
Right.
Credit is just like y'all do a lot of things to bring light to what's going on, and you don't always get the credit for it, but y'all deserve. But y'all are civically minded, and you have this drive in you that wants to see things done well. I have a drive in me that does not want to see our name in this journal. I don't want to see that we have 2 downgrade ratings.
Oh, yeah.
That's just.
We're going to get to that.
We'll get to, okay. Yeah.
We'll definitely get to that. I want to kind of play on Brandon's question that she was asking. It just kind of puts you in a hypothetical.
Sure.
I know they're not great, but
Sure.
I think you can relate. You're elected mayor, or let's say you were mayor 2 years ago
Right.
of Trussville. Dr. Martin comes to you and says, we've got to have a 4th elementary
Yes.
school. Payne is the largest enrollment in the entire state of Alabama. We've had great success with the neighborhood schools. We want to keep Payne at that size. So we need an elementary school. We're at 106, 107% capacity at the high school, I think, at the time.
Yes.
Knowing what's coming up for the middle school next year, we know it's going to get worse.
Sure.
The middle school has always been a retrofitted building. You may have even gone to high school there. I don't know.
No, I went to Banks down the street.
So it was, it's legit. Half those kids are eating in lunchrooms.
Yes.
My wife started her second teaching job was at Trussville Junior High when they had pushed the cafeteria into the sinkhole.
Yeah.
So for 7 years, she was also lunchroom monitor in her classroom.
My goodness.
So Patrick Martin sits down with you and says, Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
we need an ad valorem tax vote. How would you handle that?
I've taken the time to sit down with our legislative delegations. Even this morning I did. I won't mention names.
Okay.
And it's a team approach. We work with the state. We work with all of the players who are involved, the stakeholders, so to speak. I believe we can find necessary money in our budget. I've looked at the budget. I guess my specialty is in finance, in government finance. And there are areas that we can come up to speed in. There's areas that we can move things around. And I think we're going to have more money than what people think. Within just a couple of years, we'll be back on solid financial footing.
How'd you vote for the property tax increase? Do you mind sharing your vote?
I'm a no vote, and the reason being, I have this philosophy: being a I'm not negative education. I think we need to make the best choice with our decisions, because I think we got ourselves in that situation unintentionally by a series of missteps. And I believe that we had monies that should have gone, we should have kept those money in our reserves and not deplete our reserves. Our capital ratios were askew. We could not go to the markets. We could not borrow any money. And that was a casualty of missteps in our financial policies.
We've actually been to the market since that came out.
Yeah, we have. But here's the thing.
And didn't we get an interest rate below 4%?
We did, but but this right here, this is a report card.
Right.
This is an official report card of how well we have done governing a city. And there was not one downgrade, there was 2 downgrades.
Right.
And
Oh, there were 2.
there were 2. If you see here, and a lot of people didn't catch this right
I
here.
didn't.
There was the GO, which is the General Obligation Warrants 2.0, and we also lowered the long-term rate on the Public Building Authority, PBA. So there are actually 2 downgrades. One downgrade is bad enough, but when
Right.
you have 2 downgrades, that's 2 deficiencies marks by independent outside. I'm not trying to bring light to that at all. I'm just
Right,
saying.
well, and I did not see that about the public building. I'm glad you brought that up. That is a separate entity from the city, but the city's ultimately responsible.
Yes, yes.
Just like Trussville Redevelopment Authority, Trussville City Schools. And I want to get deeper into this, so
Certainly.
I don't want to go too deep at
Sure.
this moment.
Okay.
If you're okay, I want to come back to the question you just answered. Are you saying, as mayor, you think the city can pay for the new school?
No, I did not
New
say that.
elementary school?
It's not what I said. I said we're going to work with our state dollars, our
Okay.
state officials, who we've had discussions. I've had discussions with them about their willingness to help, and those are all positive. Not only that, the state has a very robust economy at the moment. We have we're coming to the tail end of some of the monies that we had from a federal standpoint, but we're still robust. But there's been a slight decline, of course, in our sales tax. It's been flat for some time now, at the county level, at the state level, at the city levels, and it was well documented. It was forecast, and we all incurred that.
Right.
But that was not the central reason for our downfall. That was a reason, a factor, but not the central reason.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I'm still not clear on what you would tell Dr. Martin about
Yeah,
the
no,
schools.
I am.
Okay.
I feel
What,
like
you
if
think
he
we
would have
could
come
just-
to you, if you'd have been mayor and he had come to you and said, I want to ask for this property ad valorem tax increase, I think you would have said no. Is what
No,
you're
I would have
saying.
said, let's look. I would not have gotten us in this situation to start with. This is not a good situation. I would have done things
Right,
differently.
I understand.
Okay.
And I want to talk about that.
Because all
Yeah.
it's an interrelation. It's an
But
interrelation.
it's not just up to the city
That's
to
correct.
build the schools. It's up to us.
It's a partnership.
It's a partnership. It is up to property
I mean,
owners.
you've been critical about this administration putting the ad valorem vote up.
I have been, because here's my thought. Having worked with all these businesses here in Trussville for so long, and all the people, I've had over 8 million transactions, over 8 in my career, dealing with taxpayers. Taxes, excessive taxes hurt people, and they hurt businesses. Businesses pass those taxes along to who? Consumers. And we've lost, I won't say that, but we've lost one business here in Trussville already that could not pay their taxes. And there's 2 or 3 more struggling. And if we were to hit a downturn in our economic situation, I could see that multiply. And you have all over the state, you have malls which are becoming antiquated. It's just the trend, and we're getting away from the malls. We're losing that.
I agree with you. I don't think the timing was good.
Timing was-
Me neither.
think-
But at the same time, when cities, I'm sorry to step on you.
It's okay. It's okay.
But when cities commit to a city school system, I think all property owners have some awareness that we're buying in as property owners.
Yes.
Well, I think you're both right, but inflation was
Right.
putting
No,
pressure on
absolutely.
families.
I think it's bad
Inflationary
timing
pressure.
too.
Affecting
But
gasoline prices, and we talked about this.
We did.
Gasoline prices, sales tax, grocery prices, those were pressures hitting families every single week, and that was going on when we looked to do the ad valorem vote. So I guess you would be a no on that. You would have been a no on that.
or
to the-
discouraged to try to find a different solution.
I would have found
That's what all those I hear
an
you say.
alternative solution, because I think that tax was fundamentally flawed. I was called on it but by city officials and told them ahead of time it was not going to pass. And it's problematic
And
because
Vestavia had just turned down one for the first time in history.
yeah, it's so inflationary pressures were one. 2, the bill did not systematically exclude senior citizens as it was written, and the only people that actually systematically exempted out were those who were 100% totally disabled. They didn't make that distinction.
Why would we exempt senior citizens?
Well,
I'm a senior citizen. Why should I not pay?
okay, think about this. Unless we apply a means test to it, we have a lot of people here in Trussville, and I've been around all these forums, and in respect to the garbage tax, changing subjects just a little bit, one lady told us, she said, hey, we can afford the garbage tax, but my mom can't.
Right.
She gets Social Security.
Right.
And we have to be sensitive to our seniors, and they're on fixed incomes, and they have a certain amount of discretionary spending allowable within the framework of their budgets. And $40, $60 here, but if the property tax is
I
problematic.
don't disagree. All of that is true, okay? But that senior citizen, I turned 65 on my next birthday. And I'm a little odd. I've also just graduated one out of the high school, which is not common for 65-year-olds. But my greater point, JT, is this. I know what we paid for our house when we bought in Trussville 20-something years ago. I know what realtors tell me it's worth today.
Great investment.
And it's all, in my opinion, all attributable to Trussville City Schools, because that's all that really changed. In fact, we bought the cheapest house we could find in the Trussville city limits, because it's all we could afford, and we bought it. It's now worth more than we would have ever paid for it, but we did it because we knew Trussville was going to form a school system. So as a senior citizen, yes, things get tighter, you're on limited income, and there may be cases, but if you're going to go out there and exempt every single person, even people whose, honestly, their estate may have doubled because of those
Certainly,
schools,
certainly.
but they can't pay an extra $15 in property tax.
Well, also, 15, the way it's structured, with the ad valorem increase, it's going to rise really about 7 to 8% a year. So it wasn't capped.
That was going to ask you, how often can the reassessments be done?
In the old days, up until 2004, they were done every 4 years.
Now what?
Every year.
Okay.
So what you're happening here, and that bill was also not capped. So I calculated you'd have businesses paying between $2,000 and $6,000 extra dollars a year. If you had a large business, sometimes $10,000 to $15,000. So if you start factoring the numbers as opposed to just opinions, then you start thinking, hey, these are real dollars that impact people, and how are they going to pay that? We're going to pay it. It's going to be an extra tax on us.
But now we're back to the original question.
Yes.
So your superintendent still needs an elementary school. It still needs the middle school remodel. They pulled out the last dollars they can find for the high school wing. You would reach out to state representatives.
Certainly.
I have to believe Representative Danny Garrett, who's a former Trussville City School Board member, if he had $43 million, I think he'd have got us the grant last year when we needed it. Is that realistic?
No, not the totality of that amount.
I was going to ask that.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
What do you think we could get from help from the state?
Well, I'm not going to answer a question for Shay or Danny. They're great, but
how much would you hit them for?
I would hit them for as much as we could leverage, because this is their base. We're actually hypothetical.
They are.
There might be
It's
some
very
things that I don't
hypothetical.
understand, but I don't understand what would cause the state to help a successful city like Trussville build a school when they're suffering cities. That's where I struggle.
I think that's legitimate.
It's a question.
You look at the numbers. Trussville's got one of the highest disposable incomes in the state of Alabama, like in the top 10.
Absolutely.
Property values probably it's pretty good in Jefferson
They're
County
up
after
there.
Mountain Brook, Vestavia, and Liberty Park.
They're up there.
School system rated in the top 5 school districts in the state year after year. I kind of, do you see where Brandon's coming from? Is the state really going to look at Trussville as a hardship and say, poor things?
We've watched some of these areas around us get great grants through the state to help with important things. We've seen Leeds get them, some areas
Danny
like
Garrett
this.
just brought a major grant for Jeff State and Trussville schools.
Exactly.
It's coming.
Danny and Shay, they can go out and make things. We're not asking for all the money to come. I have a plan that will save Trussville money. I can't go into it now. It will save Trussville money. It will put more disposable cash in our hands. It will help our reserves be replenished. I've helped turn around Jefferson County. I have a track record. It's not just hypotheticals.
Right.
We've right-sized certain areas. We've worked on certain areas. It's a proven track record.
But why would you not share the plan?
Wouldn't you want to share it?
Well, you know, every time I share a plan, someone else takes credit for it out there.
Okay, I get that.
Every candidate now has a smart.
At some point between now and August, whatever, you're gonna have to share some points of the plan. I think
Every candidate now has a smart growth strategy. Every single candidate has. I started with that,
Right.
and they all adopted this policy, and that's great. Leaders lead, and I'm capable of leading this. I've worked in government. I've worked with state. I've worked with cities. I've worked with counties. I worked with 35 cities for a long, long time, and they put the confidence in me to continue to elect me to this. I've served my time there. We balance to the penny every year. I told AL.com one year, I said I micromanage the budget. They said, that's not a good word, micromanage. I said, in terms of a budget, you want someone. You know, you don't want to ever spend more money than you have in your budget. That's part of our problem. One city council member said, hey, we have not been given a copy of the budget. It's incumbent upon all your elected officials to understand budgetary restraints, budgetary allowances, how you spend those money, how you allocate those money. That's part of our problem. We need a fundamental overhaul of how we educate every council member so they know going in our ceiling, our debt ceiling, our allowables for our discretionaries, all those things, so we have no confusion or misunderstanding. When a bond dealer comes to town, you know, they sound very persuasive, but we need to be persuaded with facts and not just a salesman telling us how great it can be. Right. I've dealt with the failures of Fairfield. They had some great bond deals to start with, and they end up having to pledge ad valorems to, you know, when a city gets downgraded 2 or 3 times, they have to pledge their ad valorems. So what happens is they lose their systemic ability to control the budget.
Control spending.
Yeah, so it's all done outside their restraints. So they're powerless. And that's what I want to avoid here. It happens look at Helena right now. Helena is on the threshold
in the hole,
or more.
Okay, so just staying on the school system really quick. My kids go to Cahaba.
Great school.
So you know, honestly, when it just comes to me personally, I guess I can look at it from the perspective of it's not my problem. I go to a small school, it's outstanding. I walk to school events, parking's not a big problem. Like I can just teachers are amazing, the community's amazing. I can sit here and just rattle off the amazing things about my kids get to go to Cahaba because that's where I live. I would think that most people that go to Magnolia feel the very same way. We have 3 amazingly successful elementary schools, but I don't feel like that. As far as I'm not that selfish. So I do care about the fact that Payne is the largest elementary school in the state. I think they do an amazing job. Those teachers do an amazing job. Their test scores are still amazing. I do not feel like they're getting a fair, trustful deal in size, in logistics, in parents' access to the school. I mean, I could sit here and talk about this all day long, but simply because of its size. So I think just as a parent, one of my questions for you would be, if you were to rate your top 5 issues as mayor, is Trussville's need for an additional elementary school, does it fall in that top 5? It's okay if it doesn't for you, but as a parent, I'm curious, do you view it as that important?
Trussville educational spending is a top priority. It's not the first, it's second. First priority of the city of Trussville is to stabilize its finances. It's to live within our means. It's to forego excessive expenditures, which we don't need. It's a need-based governance. And then when we're stabilized, and we can stabilize it pretty quickly, we can review so many different things, professional contracts that are redundant. There's so many things we can, policies that we can incorporate, and you just might be amazed that within a year or two how much money we actually have to contribute to the city schools. I would rate the schools on my priority list as the second thing, most important thing, but it all stems fundamentally and foundationally on getting our finances on a foundational level playing field. We're not playing catch up.
Let's get into that a little bit. You said on your campaign information that Trussville doesn't have a revenue problem, they have a spending problem.
Yes.
And that's a popular campaign statement. I've heard it in a lot of races at a lot of different levels. Based on our reporting, and based on the budgetary information and tax revenues we've seen from the city, and that I'm sure you've looked at, it's what you do.
Absolutely.
It appears that it's actually a little of both. That yes, there was some money spent that the city didn't have to spend, and probably would have been better served not spending it. But there is also a very real downturn in sales tax from brick and mortar. I'm sure you're more than familiar than you want to be with the 1901 Alabama State Constitution.
Absolutely.
And know, as a county official, the state of Montgomery took control of this state in 1901. They had no intention of the county or the cities having much of any authority.
That's correct.
So how do you fix it? I mean, 65% of our general fund is coming from the sales tax.
Yes.
So if there's a $3 million drop off, we think it's related to the online sales that have gone up dramatically. I can't find an expert anywhere that says that's going to reverse. They say it's just going to probably continue to decline.
Sales tax declines were flat prior to the decline. It was economically forecasted. All 35 cities experienced an economic decline relative to sales tax. The only city that was significantly impacted was Trussville. The only one that was downgraded, as far as the downgrade, because if we go into it, it'll say some imbalances in operation.
Yeah, but if you read the Tribune,
I read the Tribune, you did a great job. But
part of that verbiage was not correct, and we knew it immediately because we had covered council meetings where they were looking for alternatives, and the bond rating system said they weren't. We knew that wasn't
that's
true.
Yeah.
But the downgrade was from AA plus to AA.
That's correct.
And you're right. I think you're right. Trussville may have been the only city downgraded from AA plus to AA. I would also say Trussville's probably one of only about 3 or 4 cities that ever had a AA plus.
To their credit,
most of them have AA.
That's correct.
So, but my point is this: if this brick and mortar sales tax decline was $3 million last year, as you said, it was flat before that. Again, online experts say online purchases are only going to keep going up. Brick and mortar is going to continue to see a decline until there's a leveling out place. So the issue that kind of brought the city here in association with spending money they shouldn't have spent,
Correct.
That brought them to the decline in revenue, if all that's true, we're going to continue to see a decline year over year in that. That revenue accounts, as we said, 65% of the general fund. It's got to be replaced somehow, somewhere. How do you do that? Where do you find the revenue to replace declining brick and mortar sales tax?
Great question, and with respect to that question, last week I was meeting with the state of Alabama Department of Revenue, 3 of their top officials, discussing not just Trussville, but the general Jefferson County and statewide issues as far as sales tax collections. And they have a little bit different view than we might have, a perspective, but we can't, a city, a municipality, a county, it's really hard, and it's probably not best practices to predicate your budget upon pure sales tax. It has to be a dimension of it.
But because of the state constitution, it's one of the few things that you as mayor would be able to control.
That's correct. So what we have to do is control expenditures. We have to control expenditures, and this is why I'm leading you to control unnecessary expenditures.
Okay.
And I remember when I first got elected to the state office at the county, they would have 20, 40 people going to a training seminar every year from the same department. And I incorporated a policy, only 2 people go, and those 2 people go and they'll come back and train everybody else. Yeah. So we park cars. They're cars that, cars, think about this, should be given for those who are on emergency 24-hour call, those who have to be called in.
Right.
If you give every department head a car, the gas expense, so we parked our cars, a lot of them. And you just can imagine how the gas bill was up here and went to here. These small things that sound simple, but they have profound outcomes.
Well, just like in our household budget.
Yeah, exactly. There's only 2 ways to fix a shortfall.
I mean, the bills are the bills, but you can control your grocery budget to a point.
To a point.
There's only 2 ways to cure a shortfall: more revenue or less spending, or a combination of both.
Combination of both.
But that's the only options to do that. So let me ask you this. You've had a chance to review the Trussville budget.
I
I'm
have.
sure you've been looking at it. What items would you cut? What do you see now that you're thinking, that's wasteful spending and we could probably do a whole lot better than that?
I have no, you hear a lot of fear-based comments, like he's going to cut out the library, he's going to cut out this. I have no intention, we have no intention.
This is a good place to clear that up.
In your defense, I don't think I've heard anybody accuse you of cutting anything yet, but it'll come.
It'll come. We have no intention of cutting any jobs. That's just not on the table.
But can you say that? Is
We
that,
don't have intention.
Are you sure?
We don't know. We have to get in there and look carefully and astutely. So I think I'm best qualified to look at a budget. I think I'm best qualified for my 20-something years experience. Hell South was one of the 8 largest frauds in the history of the world. I worked on that. So my background is in these things, and I think that I have my qualification will lend itself in a superior fashion to help Trussville eradicate any wasteful spending, any unnecessary or redundant spending, take that out of the budget, get a clean budget, and work on replenishing our reserves. God forbid, what if we had a tornado come through? Think about this. We had a storm come through Tutwiler and it tore it up. What if we had a pervasive storm like Clay had several years ago?
Yep.
How are we going to pay for it?
so specifically back to Scott's question, have you seen anything yet in the budget that you're like,
Lots of things.
I'm going to put that on my
Is
list?
it fair to say your approach to fixing the city finances would be look for wasteful spending and cut that out?
That's one
Is that your
approach.
driving approach?
Now, I'm not going to say it's the driving is the component.
Okay.
And we down the road we may look at refinancing things and consolidating things, and we'll get some things paid off and free up some cash, and also work at attracting new businesses. We have lots of empty places, and we need to partner with some retail growth strategists and get those filled up. And I see no reason for people to leave Trussville. We should shop here. I'm a proponent of shopping here.
I'm with you.
We need to talk about 2 things. We need to talk about online. But before we get to that, have you spent very much time looking at the 2040 plan? And if so, how do you feel about it?
I have. I think there's. I'm not going to go into detail. There's highlights. I think there's highlights to it. I think it was considerable focus and attention was devoted, and I think it has merit to it. I'm not gonna cut it right now or say anything about it. My first priority is stabilizing this budget, stopping the bleeding, and we stop the bleeding, we're going to see a turnaround pretty quick, and we're going to cut wasteful spending, and then we can start working on our future objectives, our wants. But right now we're going to take care of our needs, and one of those needs is leveling the budget and working for the school system, building this school, helping to get schools where they need to be, and partner with them.
I think we're all in agreement, and you've already said you saw it in 35 cities across the county. The flattening and decline of the sales tax is real, probably going to continue. Some of that was replaced by the SSUT, which, when it first came out, I can tell you, we got 9 mayors that we talked to. That was seen as a godsend. I think the county felt the same way, a windfall to get that first tax. But the issue is, it's 8% for online sales tax. Most cities, I don't know about the state, but in Jefferson County, 10's pretty much the average for most, right? 10%.
Yes.
Which means the state gets 4 pennies. State still gets their 4 pennies online. County gets 2 pennies. County still gets their 2 pennies online. Now, other counties in the state may be hurting, but you're not. No, Jefferson County's not. Cities get 4. In our case, in Trussville, the city gets 3 and they give 1 penny to the school. But most cities in Jefferson County get 4, but there's only 2 cents. Number one problem, there's only 2 cents in the online sales tax for the cities. The state and the counties did not bother to prorate theirs to take care of their cities. So that's one problem. The second problem is the state legislature passed a horrendous distribution process where they're sending every city their percentage of the city portion of the sales tax based on population. And I don't want to call names, But I know without any question in my mind, residents of some cities are spending a whole lot more money than residents of other cities, but they're all getting the same percentage back. That's not sustainable. It actually punishes the most successful cities in the state.
It does.
Have you addressed that with the legislators? As county tax collector, I could see you sticking your nose right on in that.
I've
have
worked,
every right to do something.
I've worked very proactively with our legislatures, for a whole delegation, on a variety of topics that impact cities, counties. It can be from tax sales, it can be from interest on overbids, it can be a million topics. You know, the association, which I'm a part of, AATA, they call me quite frequently, email me, hey, we need you to work on our delegation. And our delegation has done a really good job for the most part, and they're very well-meaning and very helpful. There's some things that get bogged down or that does not get the significant attention that it should, and it gets left out. And the calendar usually runs out on those things. They're well-intentioned. They may make it out of committee. They may not make it out of committee.
Right.
You get your hopes up when they do. It may pass in the House, and in the Senate it'll fail over here. So I've worked on a lot of those issues, and we need to really address that. And I think the Mayor's Association needs to come together, and with as they have, and they need to bring in the legislative delegation.
You're probably where Walt Maddox
Yeah,
is going to lead the charge in Tuscaloosa.
And Walt's done a great job
Yeah.
around the state. He's a leader in that regard. And we need to, especially here in Jefferson County, we need to get our delegation, all of them, and we need to get Roger Smitherman, we need to get Jabbo, we need to get all those players to the table on the Senate side and the House side and say, hey, we need help in this addressing. And we need it. And we can get some business community to help us as well.
They're not getting along too well in Montgomery right now, JT. It went south last session, so I don't know if we'll get Jabbo and Roger in the same room right now.
But think about this. UAB was at a standstill as far as finances a few years ago. Those two gentlemen came together, and there was a huge need at UAB, and they rolled their sleeves up and worked together, and they got a significant funding from our governor to make that project at UAB work. And to their credit, they both worked together. I think if it's an important issue, we can get them together. I think we can. Our relationship with both of them.
Well, Vestavia would be a city hurt by the division of this online sales tax, as would Mountain Brook, as is Trussville. I've already talked to a few legislators that are concerned about pushback from smaller cities who basically had no retail tax before they got the online, and they think it's more difficult than it looks.
Could be.
So,
but we need to try.
We do.
We need to attempt it.
I think you've done a good job recently of bringing attention to the fact that Trussville gives that extra percent of sales tax to the school system.
That's a point I'm sure that it's not lost on you.
I don't know if everybody realizes that a city council could change that at any time.
Trussville's actually working off of 75% of their best revenue generator.
Is that something that you would change, or would you continue to let that?
I'm going to echo this again. We're going to continue to support Trussville school systems.
Okay.
That's been, if you notice, the teachers, administrators have always supported me because they know I'm going to fund schools. They know that's part of my agenda, part of our objective, and part of our calling to educate. And anyone that would leave that off the table doesn't need to be elected.
But it's a legitimate question, JT, because as you recall, Hoover did it.
They did.
Hoover pulled the penny back from Hoover City Schools.
They did.
It was kind of devastating.
It was.
The school system for a while. I guess they ultimately leveled out and got on their own feet. But it's a question that I don't think I would have ever asked a mayoral candidate until now. You know,
it's hard to
envision.
envision.
See Hoover do it, you're like, well, we better ask.
It's hard to envision a municipality that would take action that would harm a school district.
But do you think it's also important for the people of Trussville to understand one of the reasons Trussville's facing some of the issues, we're in agreement, overspending and loss in revenue is a culprit there, but they kind of started fighting the fight 20 years ago with one hand behind their back when they, and listen, I'm not saying I disagree with the penny going to the schools.
Sure.
That's allowed, I think that's the best bang we've ever gotten for a buck.
I agree.
I mean, I think the evidence is in our forefathers who made that decision to give the penny to the school system were brilliant. And that's why that school system shot to among the top 5, 6 in the state of Alabama.
Absolutely.
But now isn't it kind of catching up with the city a bit at this point?
It could be, but you have to understand, part of the economic engine that runs Trussville is the school system.
Absolutely.
They're interrelated. They're joined at the hip.
Absolutely.
So you want to sustain that.
I don't think we're the fastest growing city without it.
You're not. So you want to sustain that relationship, and you want to sustain those contributions, and maybe even build on those contributions for the future. Get ourselves in a position where we could.
So this is a question we're asked each one of
Surely.
you guys that doesn't really come up a lot for discussion in Trussville. I think it's interesting that it doesn't. Do you think that Trussville needs to look different at the position of mayor and consider a city manager?
Well, I've had the privilege of working with mayors and city managers. If you have a good city manager, they're very, very valuable. I'll give you an example. Mountain Brook has Sam Gaston's a wonderful city manager who has just thrived for years and years and years and years. Other cities have gotten managers and they'll ship them off within a year because the egos collide with the council or with the mayor. So it's dependent upon your selection of that
Sam's
city
in a sweetheart position.
And unfortunately, Sam, well, great for him, but unfortunately for the city, he's retiring out.
Right.
And so they're going to be hard pressed to replace him on a long-term basis because he's such a phenomenal person. If you go walking off the street, he's going to take time to come talk to you.
Do you think he's kind of been the epitome of a city manager?
He is.
If you could get that guy.
He is the epitome, and they're fewer and far between. If you go on government websites, there's cities all over America, in search committees looking for city managers, always, constantly, because at some point in time, the egos will collide. You have different type. Some are PR guys, some are fact driven, and when you bring in one from out of state, it's not fair to he or she because there's a huge learning curve about the state laws, municipal laws, ordinances, county laws. They have to learn. So it's not really fair to bring someone in from out of state, in my opinion, unless they're an exceptional candidate. To know the history of the city, the school districts, and all that stuff, because there could be missteps. It does matter. History does matter.
It does matter.
So
you would not be inclined to lean toward a city manager at this time?
Right now, we need to get before we have another high dollar salary in the mix, we need to stabilize. I've been asked to be city manager for different cities through the years, many times.
It pays more than mayor.
It pays a lot more than a mayor. I can make a lot more money in the private sector. I don't do this because I get rich off working government service. It's a part of my family. My father was a state trial court judge for 44 years in the state. He was named one of the 8 top judges in America one year. So it's a legacy of service for my family. He could have made millions as a trial lawyer. He chose to be a judge and serve the community. He was a pastor too, and he was a colonel in the Army. So he worked all the time.
And probably one of the most respected judges in our life.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That means a lot. He really was well respected.
He was.
And he was an author, and he was a local historian as well. So he did a lot of things. So I learned from him a great deal.
Yeah. I have a question regarding, and you probably know where this is going, the Jefferson County consent decree.
Yes.
You made the papers.
Yes.
As you probably recall.
Yes.
And it's out there floating around, so we might as well just talk about
the
documentation of it.
Sure.
In the I think it was the consent decree, one of the filings.
Yes.
You were mentioned, or your office was mentioned, as an example of egregious cronyism, based on the hiring of John DeLucia. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes.
And the accusation, I believe it came from the personnel department director, was that you had rigged the scoring of the interview process to help Mr. DeLucia over a more qualified candidate because he was a friend of your family. And I believe he was listed in your dad's obituary as an honorary son. It worked for your dad.
He worked for my dad.
Can you kind of explain
I'll be happy
that
to.
situation?
Well, first of all, that was the consent decree was a 1970s. The origins of that case.
I think this was one of the requests that it be dismissed, or was it the dispute to dismiss it?
Okay, this was
it was in the 90s.
This was a DEI case that the lawyers from New York brought to be legitimate, in a case, the person has to be served with a subpoena. They have to be deposed. I'll give $10,000 for anybody that can find that subpoena or find my deposition, because there was none. There was a brief given to the court, and they signed off on it. I never appeared in court. I was never given a subpoena. I was never testified. There were no rebuttals. My attorney never made a appearance record, because it was.
But the personnel director evidently made a statement. Correct?
Yes. Yeah. He made a statement, because he became the personnel director, and he also became basically the not the consent. Anyway, yeah, he profited off that, but there was absolutely no legitimacy to that, because Mr. Lucia was a licensed attorney and an accountant, and he worked with the state of Alabama. He was superiorly qualified as those two, and the person that made the allegation was not even the top considerations, and this person also had a history of filing grievances and complaints throughout the county.
But you understood what the claim was that was.
Oh,
made.
I understood it, but it has no foundational merit.
And I'm sure you understand. I don't know how many jobs you're over at the tax collector's office. I would guess it's actually quite a few.
Yeah, how many approximately?
Well, see, let me explain. We have the downtown office, we have the Gardendale office, we have the Hoover office, we have the Center Point office, and we have the Bessemer office, which serves as the assistant tax collector for this division. And then we have other IT workers or other people that work for us from time to time. But what's interesting about that is my black employees all wrote letters and I have those letters to that effect. That never happened. And my chief deputy was African American. He was Eric Burks. Unfortunately, he passed away with a heart attack just a couple of years ago.
I don't, to be honest, I don't recall any racial allegations toward you on that.
Okay.
I thought it was just cronyism because he was a family friend.
But people hired friends, but he was the most qualified. He was the attorney for office for many years. He worked for office for 15 years, and the receiver said it was a decade of incompetence, which the receiver never knew him or met him. It's politically motivated. Again, I was never subpoenaed. I was never served. I never gave a deposition. If anybody can find those, I want to see them, because it never happened. And it was after the fact, we found out about it from a third party. The Board of Equalization chairman calls us up and said, "Did you know that y'all's name was written?" I said,
"You didn't know it was in the filing?"
We didn't know it was in the filing until you told us sometime later, because the attorney for the county didn't inform us of that. So that has no merit, no foundational merit, not substantive. It's merely a purely biased rumor that someone circulated at the county.
Okay, and you can understand the concern
Sure.
when that shows up in a federal court document. You've been around politics long enough to know the good, bad, and the ugly of it, and we've all seen government, and I think in Trussville you're looking at about 350 jobs. We've all seen governments at every level throughout the country turn into a jobs program for friends and family.
That's correct.
And nobody wants to see that happen to their community.
That's right.
So that's why we ask. Can I ask what your relationship is with John DeLucia outside of the tax collector's office? Do y'all have any business relationships?
We have no business relationship. He lives in another city, another town.
But again, let me explain why I'm asking, because we're not on the fishing aspect.
Sure.
Both of y'all's names popped up on a property at Fallen Rock, the townhomes behind Grant's in Grayson Valley.
Those were two separate. I had my own business and he had his own business. We're never together on any type of investment.
What about the nonprofit?
Nonprofit? Yeah, we went to church together.
But you formed a nonprofit.
We had a Bible study, church together. We donated money to the same things.
But that's what I'm asking. Were y'all partners in the nonprofit? Were you
there's no partners in nonprofits. You give money. Well,
there's principal owners of nonprofits.
Yeah, but we never took a salary or anything like that.
Okay. But did both of y'all do that together? Did y'all form the nonprofit together?
We go back in time, probably at some point in time.
Okay.
We were friends from church, but like I said, he was a licensed attorney and accountant, one of the few we had in the county. Mm-hmm. So I really think that has, he did an admirable job for the state of Alabama. He did an admirable job for our office, and I think if you were to call the office right now, people will tell you he's one of the best employees the county ever had.
Okay.
Is it fair to,
He's in Tennessee now?
Yes.
Okay.
is it fair to ask him about, because it seems like every mayoral race we go through, the process of school board elections is an issue.
Yeah, I don't know if you've looked at it, but it's continuing to be an issue.
It always comes up.
5
And
years
so
ago.
do you have a,
You want me to give you a little background?
Sure.
He may not have followed this closely. About 5 years ago, one of the primary issues in the mayoral race, and it will be an issue again this time. Every single school board member who had wanted to be reappointed since the beginning of Trussville City Schools was automatically reappointed. That became a bone of contention.
Sure.
And going into the last municipal election, it was one of the driving factors. Also concerns about whether or not that process was open and transparent. It appeared to a lot of citizens that a small group of people were keeping the same people on board for as long as they wanted to. And then our school system blew up 2 years ago. Literally blew up. We live streamed it. It was televised. Do you have have you looked at the process?
Oh, yes.
Do you understand? Do you have an opinion on it?
Yeah, here's the thing. I think that you have a lot of educators who have very strong opinions about the leadership of a school board. And I think that what they value most was having another educator on the school board, a retired educator. I think that was their contentious point. That's what they advocated strongly for.
They wanted another one.
They wanted another retired educator, a voice. And they're fine. I've talked to them, and that's what they wanted. They wanted a retired educator, and they had several, from what I understand, very well spoken of, with great histories, PhDs, EDS, all the advanced degrees, and they were not. The teachers say they're not given fair consideration. So that's their point of contention. I think a fair resolution. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
well, no, I was just going to say overall, like getting out of individual people appointed, just overall the process.
Yeah.
Because
The
the
appointment
city,
process
yeah,
itself.
the city kind of leads the process.
Yes. The
And
vetting, the
yeah,
vetting.
That's really
yeah.
the only control the council has, is they get to pick
The board
the
members. You know, I think probably an equitable solution will be limit the board terms. That might be more palatable for the
That would force
people.
turnover.
That would
Yeah.
force turnover and give the people who are anxious to serve fresh time to be installed.
And to be honest, I'm not a term limit guy because I think that's the voters' call.
I agree.
But this is an appointment, not an election. So that may be a case where term limits are the answer. It could be.
That's probably the most palatable thing.
I'm interested in what you said, and a lot of those educators are also friends of ours. My
Sure.
wife just retired from
Good
the
people.
classroom after 30 years. I would, if I were having that conversation with my friends who are educators, and I know some of them who did push for an educator on the board, to me it wasn't about the person as much as it was about the process, to be honest. My concern, we've already got a career educator on our school board.
Correct.
Which means that's 20% of the vote. But that board represents all the families in Trussville.
Correct.
And I don't think 40% of the families in Trussville are families of educators. So I think you could run the danger of a school board becoming more of an echo chamber.
True.
If you put a lot of educators on it. And then do you grow, or do you just talk about how we used to do things? So that's a side thing, but that would be a concern with too many.
There's two sides to that equation.
Yeah.
You're going to have the pro and you're going to have the con. It's something we're going to have to address.
And I think with school choice now a major factor in the state of Alabama, I mean, it's done. We may be thinking about a totally different look for the board.
Because you can have parents that say, "Hey, I have an alternative now. I can take my child and I can get paid for it and have it satisfied and go elsewhere."
And
so,
I think you'd have a hard time beating Trussville City Schools, but we cover schools directly across the highway that is a complete opposite situation. So, what you got?
The last thing I was going to say was just for clarification. You do manage a lot of people with the county.
Yes.
In your position now. If you were to win the election, you resign immediately as tax collector?
The state law is really clear. You
Okay.
can only have one elected position. I've come to the conclusion, I've served Jefferson County for a long time, and I planned on retiring at the end of this term, which is I'm running in 20. If the term ends in 2026 for the election. Okay. Yeah, that's going around. Why does JT need 2 jobs? Why? I see it's impossible for the state. You have to resign, and you can only have one. It's your choice, So okay. I wouldn't have no intention of keeping 2 jobs because that would violate state law. And so that's not really possible.
I'm convinced the only guy that can do that effectively is Ronnie Dixon in Clay. And he somehow manages to wear 3 full-time jobs.
Ronnie's a good person. He's a hard worker. He does a commendable job in all that he does.
He does. I've got, I think, one last question.
I've been ticking them off. I think we've covered.
Okay. Yeah, this has been in depth. That's what we asked for, and that's what you've given us, and we thank you for that.
Thank you.
My last question, and I watched your video this morning. I've watched so many of your videos in the last couple of days, I can't remember which one I saw when, but they're all fresh on my mind. One of the things you've talked about extensively, our readers have talked about extensively, I think it's been an issue in Trussville in the 20-something years I've been here, certainly the 17 that I've owned the newspaper, infrastructure. Yeah. As you well know, you know how this game is played. Our north-south corridor is a state highway. It is paralleled by an interstate that is a state highway. Our east-west corridors are both county roads.
That's correct.
So everything we do on our major corridors requires cooperation with the state and with the county. You've kind of addressed your relationship with Senator Shelnut and Representative Garrett. Obviously, you got to have a good working relationship. Do you feel that you do?
I've had an extraordinary relationship with the state of Alabama for a long time. When it came time for the Board of Equalization and the tax assessor and tax collector to go their different directions in software acquisitions and getting away from the mainframe, I inherited a failed program from a prior predecessor. So we looked for new integrated solutions that would streamline so all those different departments could communicate together without building extensive bridges. Well, I had a great relationship with the state of Alabama, and they came in and said, JT, if you will agree to go with us, we're going to pay for the entirety of your system, because we know that so they footed the bill for the entirety of our multi-million-dollar computer system. Right. And they also paid for the maintenance agreement, which are, as y'all know, quite expensive for the next several years. And the gentleman that made that possible, Mr. Bill Bass, who was Director of Revenue for the state for many years. I saw him at our conference last week, and I always go by and shake his hand and say, thank you, sir. I said, you made Jefferson County successful, people like you have. And it's people like him that understands the nuances of cities and counties, their interrelational dependency, and how we brought money to the state and other cities. And he understood that. And you have to be grateful and thankful for those relationships. And you're invaluable. And I'm been blessed.
No, and that's why I asked specifically about our representatives and our senator and our representative. I watched that unfold. The gasoline tax, the whole thing. Senator Shelnut voted no. Representative Garrett voted yes. And I've got very good connections inside the governor's office. I know exactly how that went over, and it wasn't pretty. But Danny's yes vote is the reason we've got 6 lanes of interstate being paved right now.
That's right.
He's probably a big reason the improvements have been made on Highway 11. And then you look to the county, Joe Knight was instrumental in getting the improvements on Charleville Road. Yes. My address is not Charleville Road, but my house faces Charleville Road.
So you know firsthand.
So, and I'm on that end. So I know how bad it was. I know how important this improvement was. You ran against Joe Knight.
That's right.
In 2018. How y'all?
Joe and I have been friends for years. I support.
I'm going to tell you, he wasn't happy during the election.
No, he was not.
And I saw
happy.
some of the campaign information.
Let me tell you. When Joe ran, my family supported Joe. I supported Joe. My friends supported Joe.
Why'd you run against him?
I got the old commission. It was a fundamental disagreement about the DEI case that the county should have asserted a defense, and they didn't. So that was it. So I can show you. Joe and I text each other. If he has a taxpayer that has a problem, he's going to text me. I want to solve it. If I have a problem that needs the county commission in this area, I'm going to text Joe or call Joe. See, we park 3 places a place from each other. So we have a working relationship, and that's I maintain those relationships with all the commissioners. Actually, Jimmy Stevens, a great commissioner, and we have Mike Boland, Justice Boland, a fantastic person and fantastic. He and I have been parking next to each other for years. We speak every day. Every day I see him. And all the commissioners do the best they can do for their districts, and they work hard. But we are, from time to time, all the commissioners sometimes get in a different direction with each other, just like the House, our House caucus does here. It just happens.
But here in Trussville, as you know, we're unfortunately very dependent on others.
Sure.
What's the word on the kindness of others?
Yeah.
I can't remember the play. But we want to make sure if you get elected mayor, they will answer your calls, because it's going to be.
We have a wonderful working relationship with the Senate, the House, and not only do I work with the ones here in our eastern corridor, but I work with the ones over the whole county, because we need them for their tax votes.
I got one final question that I almost forgot, and I think this is important. One of your campaign issues was paving and maintaining roads, and you say both in front and behind gates. I'm assuming you're referring to one of our 2 gated neighborhoods.
Well, here's the thing. What that should have stated with more clear preciseness. The best way to help those dedicated streets, the dedicated ones which are behind the gates, is we provide essential and basic services to those. We'll clean gutters, we'll do all kinds of things. We're not going to pave their roads, but the best thing you can do for those neighborhoods is you allow them to co-op at your price.
The city's been doing that.
The city can do that.
The city has done that.
But get this. I don't know if you're familiar with micro paving.
Yes, I am familiar with it.
I'm a proponent of micro paving. The state's doing it now. They're doing it in South Alabama. Yeah. And I met with their rep, and they put a maintenance coat on a road that extends the lifetime out for a protracted time, which extends the life of that road. It looks good. It has grab to it. And I kind of like that, because it's a fraction of the cost of actually paving the road.
You just get more use out of it.
You get more use out of it.
But, and people, I'm sure people understand, when we're talking about roads behind the gated community, those are roads that have not been turned over to the city of Trussville. Those are private roads.
That's right.
And by law, you can't spend tax dollars on private property.
That's correct. That's correct.
But I do think it's a good idea, and I do think the city has worked out with their asphalt person. They've been able to get them the same price they gave the city.
That's right. So and the problem is getting them on the same schedule, because these usually have a lifetime span of 25 years, our roads do, unless they're heavy use, have industrial utilization, and then it's probably 10, 12 years, requires more. But getting the
and Carrington's not the first one. I've had friends in other cities, other states, love being behind the gates.
Sure. Until
they got an assessment for repaving. And had no idea. It was there, it was in the paper, they just didn't know.
That's right.
So if does that, I mean, can the city clean the gutters, and does the leaf truck go down?
They do.
The city does.
They do those things. They do a lot of stuff like that. From my understanding, other cities they do.
If you could almost build a case for it if the gutters are going into the Jefferson County drains.
That's good.
Then you're maintaining your drainage system. So that's what
you hear. Some of the owners say, "Hey, we help the police department. They don't have as many calls in our area because we're quartered off," and they have a point there. So, but we're constrained by state law.
Well, when I saw that, and I'll tell you exactly why it jumped off at me. I have a friend, former mayor of Northport. After a bunch of storms, he sees a sanitation crew cleaning up and said, "Hey, go ahead and get that ditch right there." And the crew chief said,
"Nope.
City of Northport ends right here." And he says, "All right, just go ahead and clean that off." He got the ethics complaint about 30 days later. It was guilty.
You can't do.
And that's it.
It's probably innocent. Probably well-meaning.
It was just you're cleaning this ditch. Go ahead and get that guy's too. And they're like, "No, the city limits ends right here." He did it. He got turned in. He was guilty. He didn't have. I mean, he had to go to jail for anything, but I think it was administrative. But that floored me. It just floored me that was a ethics violation.
Yeah.
And that's when I found out you cannot send public works on private property.
You cannot.
Well, I don't have anything else. How about you?
JT, we really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
I do think other questions will come up by the time we have forums, because you guys will really
We
hit
probably
the, yeah, I mean, serious campaigning will really get going after next Tuesday, when y'all know for sure, you know, who exactly the candidates are for sure. And so I'm sure there'll be other things to talk about at the forum, but we do appreciate you giving us this time today just to ask whatever we
We will.
want.
When I told you
been
everything's
fun.
pretty much on the table.
Sure.
You
Hey,
see.
those are all fair questions. I appreciate y'all's time. I appreciate y'all's platform. I appreciate y'all's concern with the city and its well-being and its future. And that's an admirable profession that both of y'all provide for the city. No one else does it.
Well, we both know it takes a lot to put yourself out there to run for office. And we appreciate every candidate, win, lose, or draw.
Yes.
I would not want to do what any of you are doing. And I appreciate very much the
It's
fact
very
that,
encouraging.
well, I'm just telling you, I appreciate the fact that there are people willing to do it, because I'm not one of them. But I do. I appreciate it, and I mean that.
Thank you very much. You wouldn't want to collect taxes either. It's
No,
it's no
we don't want that
easier.
job.
It's no easier than being. I mean, it's not an easy profession.
I don't want that
Okay,
job.
well, we're going to wrap it up.
We
so
will.
we appreciate you.
Thank you, JJ.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
appreciate you
Thank both of
joining
y'all.
us. This will stay on our Facebook page for people to access all through the municipal elections